Hello, I am Kingsley and I'm a technical writer and blockchain engineer at Truffle. Today, I'm going to show you how to set up Truffle on your local machine using the Ultimate Guide to Truffle. The Ultimate Guide to Truffle is essentially broken down into two parts. The first part walks us through what Truffle is, some of the benefits of building with Truffle, and the core libraries that form the core of Truffle. The second part goes into details, touching on all of the tools that form the Truffle suite, starting from the Truffle command line interface, the Truffle dashboard, Ganache, and Truffle for VS Code extension. According to the guide, Truffle is basically a collection of tools that makes the development of blockchain-based application easy on EVM-compatible networks. So Truffle is mostly focused on the smart contract side of dApp development, but also includes tools that makes it easy to develop front-end applications. A typical example being the Truffle box. Truffle box is essentially a repository of boilerplate code that has all you need to start building without necessarily needing you to do much configurations. A very popular one being the Truffle React box that's popular among the front end ecosystem. The guide also goes further to touch on some of the benefits of building with Truffle, which includes better insight into transaction details using the Truffle dashboard, which is something we are going to touch on in more detail later in this tutorial. Truffle allows you to better diagnose and fix errors quickly using the Truffle debugger, console log feature, and the testing framework. Truffle has a really unique workflow that allows you to focus on your dApps features as opposed to be, tinkering and, fixing and working on workflows. If you're using the Ganache Zero mainnet forking feature, right, it allows you the opportunity to, fork the mainnet, replicate that environment during your development, which gives you access to, whatever is going on the mainnet. Then finally, Truffle can be applied to any stage of your dApp development, right? So irrespective of if you're just starting out or if you have an existing project, Truffle can be plugged in into each of any of this process because it's really, really flexible. Part 3 of the guide touches on some of the core libraries that form the foundation of Truffle suites. A very popular one being the Truffle debugger. The Truffle debugger is literally a portable Solidity debugger library that is available on NPM for download, which means that you can use this in collaboration with other tools or with Truffle, right? So it has features like breaking point and stepping through, variable inspection, watch expressions, and also supports Viper. Another really important library that forms the core of Truffle is the Truffle codec, which is essentially a library that provides an interface for decoding Solidity smart contracts. And finally, there's the Truffle Fetch Compile, right, which is a library that is used to obtain externally verified sources and then compiling them. Now that you understand what Truffle is, some of the benefits of building with Truffle, as well as some of the core libraries that form the foundation of Truffle, let's delve into each of the user-facing tools that's contained within Truffle suite, starting from the Truffle command line interface. So this is more like the bread and butter of Truffle, right? So it's a command line interface that allows you to build, test, and deploy smart contracts on the Ethereum network. It is required that you have Node.js version 14 or later installed on your machine before you can use the Truffle command line interface. I personally prefer downloading all these packages using NVM, Node Version Manager, because it allows me to switch between different versions of Node. I'm going to switch to my command line right now and then run some of these commands so we can do them together. The first thing you want to do is to ensure that you have Node.js installed. So to do that, just run node-v. This will tell you the version of Node.js that you're currently using. But since I use NVM, I can actually just switch between Node versions. Now that I have Node installed, I can simply run npm install-global Truffle. So this should install the latest version of Truffle for me. And since I already have it installed, I'm just going to end this installation process. With Truffle installed, it's advisable to also install Ganache. I can do that with the npm install-g Ganache command. With Truffle and Ganache both installed on my PC, I can verify what version of Truffle I'm currently running on by running the command truffle version. The next step is to create a project with Truffle CLI. So with Truffle CLI, there are basically two ways you can create a project. The first way is to use the Truffle unbox command, right? This reaches out to the Truffle box repository and fetches the specified box that you've passed, onto the command. The second way is to use the Truffle init command. So the Truffle init command would create a fresh project from start for you. For this tutorial, I'm going to be going with the Truffle on box approach as opposed to the Truffle init approach. The Truffle on box approach allows me to clone a Truffle box that has contracts already, plus test files and configuration set up already, as opposed to using the Truffle init approach that creates a bare bone project for me. So I'll just quickly run Truffle on box meta coin into the folder called meta coin. Sweet. So this has created a project that has all that I require to start, testing and compiling. So I'll just cd into the MetaCoin folder and open up VS Code. As you can see, I already have two contracts. There's a convertlib.so and the metacoin.so contract files. And then I also have a migrations file. This is mostly for deployment, as you would see going forward. Then there's the metacoin test file, as well as the test metacoin solidity file, which has tests written in both Solidity and JavaScript, as well as the Truffle configuration file for this project. So we now have a project that has some contracts in it. Let's go ahead and compile those contracts. To compile contracts with Truffle, just need to run the Truffle compile command, and it would go into the contracts directory, compile every single contract included in that contract directory, and export or like spit out a build folder for you that has the contract ABI. So the next thing we want to test out is how to test using Truffle. So we've written some Solidity tests as well as some JavaScript tests. To run this test with Truffle, all you need to run is Truffle test. It compiles the contract and runs all the tests. Sweet. So with all the tests passing, let's now deploy this contract to Ganache. Ganache, we already installed Ganache earlier in the course, but if you haven't already, feel free to install that. I already have Ganache installed, so I'm just going to run the command Ganache. So this gives me 10 free accounts, each loaded with 100 ETH, 1,000 ETH actually, that I can actually play with. So to be able to deploy directly to Ganache, I would need to go into the Truffle configuration file and specify what network I want to deploy to. So in this case, Truffle comes with this particular development network that I can just uncomment and point to. So since Ganache is running on the same port 8545, then once I deploy my contract and specify the development network, that's literally where my contracts are going to be deployed to. So I'll just run Truffle migrates -- network development. Nice. Note that this is only possible because this particular Truffle box comes with a deployment script, also known as a migration script. If I was using the Truffle init approach, I would have to write this script from scratch, which isn't difficult to write actually, just very basic JavaScript function. As you can see on the terminal that's currently running Ganache is making some RPC calls. These are all happening within my local machine, so I'm not interacting with any testnet or even the mainnet at all. Great. So we've seen how you can create a project using the Truffle unbox or Truffle init Truffle commands, how you can compile your contract, how you can test those contracts, and how you can also deploy them to a blockchain simulator like Ganache. So what if you want to deploy to a testnet or even the mainnet? This is where the Truffle dashboard comes in. If you've had any experience deploying contracts before the Truffle dashboard, you know that for you to deploy contracts successfully, whether to Rinkeby, Gurley, or whatever testnet you were used to, you would need to extract your private key or secret recovery phrase from your MetaMask wallet, put it in a .env file, which then get picked up by Truffle during deployment. So Truffle dashboard takes all of those things away. There's no need to expose your secret recovery phrase at all. To use the Truffle dashboard, you have to make sure you're running on the latest version of Truffle because the latest versions of Truffle always ship with the Truffle dashboard. So I'll just double check that I currently have access to run the Truffle dashboard by running Truffle dashboard. Sweet. So if you have the a recent version of Truffle, you should also see this dashboard. So to be able to connect successfully with this dashboard, you also need to have a MetaMask wallet. Right now, the Truffle dashboard is reading from my MetaMask wallet that is connected already. If I choose to switch networks to say Girly, I would have to connect my wallet to the Truffle dashboard from scratch. I plan to deploy to Girly since I have some Girly eats on here. So I'm going to be confirming my network. Yeah, I want to deploy to Girly. The next step, since I have the Truffle dashboard running, is just to specify what network I want to, deploy my contracts to. Remember the last time we had to set up some configuration options here in our Truffle config file to point to Ganache. But in this case, I don't need to do any of that. I just need to come on here and tell Truffle to deploy my contract to a network that is called dashboard. Notice I did not specify this network anywhere, right? It's just built into Truffle. So once I click on that, I get a prompt from the Truffle dashboard asking me to reject or confirm this particular deployment. I'm going to confirm that. It switches onto my MetaMask wallet. I accept that and give it some time to finalize. That's been deployed. So the first request was actually to deploy the convert-lib library, not really a contract. It's actually a library that's going to be linked to the MetaCoin contract. So this second request is to deploy the actual MetaCoin contracts. I'm just going to go on here to the Truffle dashboard and confirm that as well. Accept on my MetaMask wallet and give it some more time. So yeah, this has been deployed and we can double check that this is successful by copying the contract address, navigating to Girly Etherscan, and pasting this address here, and boom. Fantastic. You can see that it was deployed 26 seconds ago. So as you can see, it's really easy to deploy contracts to whether mainnet or testnet using the Truffle dashboard. At no point in this tutorial have I exposed my security recovery phrase. It's also important to know that the Truffle dashboard can be used in collaboration with Hardhat, not just Truffle. So there's a Hardhat plugin that was recently released. So just go ahead and download that if you're a Hardhat user, and you can get access to all of these Truffle dashboard features. The next tool we are going to be discussing is Ganache. Ganache is essentially a local blockchain for dApp development. It allows developers to simulate the Ethereum network but on their local machines, allowing them to test, debug, and deploy smart contracts even before it's ready for testnets and mainnets. Ganache typically comes in two flavors, Ganache CLI and Ganache UI. We've touched on the Ganache CLI a little bit in this tutorial, so let's check out the Ganache GUI. To get access to Ganache, you need to visit trufflesuits.com, and there you would see get started with Ganache, and you can just download Ganache for your operating system. I already have Ganache GUI installed on my computer, so I'm just going to pull it up from another window. So this is what Ganache UI looks like. The first time you launch Ganache UI, you're going to have the options to quick start or create a new workspace. I always choose to create a new workspace because it allows me the opportunity to persist my project settings. Yeah, I can just come in here and throw in a project name. I can just call this Ganache project and select a Truffle configuration file for this particular project and start. And then here, I have access to 10 free accounts, each loaded with 100 ETH. What I like about Ganache UI the most is it allows me the opportunity to sort of have a block explorer view. I can, check out the blocks that have been mined. I can check out the transactions that are sent, contracts that have been deployed, events as they happen, and just, study the logs of this particular project. And it allows me to switch between, workspaces, right? I can jump from one workspace to another depending on what project I'm working on. So cool. That's it for Ganache UI. You already installed Ganache CLI previously, but if you've not done that, please feel free to do that. Now on to connecting the Truffle project with Ganache. To connect the Truffle project with Ganache, all you need to do is have a running instance of Ganache, whether it's Ganache UI or Ganache CLI. And then depending on which of the flavors of Ganache you're running, you'd have to specify the port. So if you're running Ganache CLI, you make sure the port is pointing to your Truffle configuration port is pointing to 8545. But if you're using Ganache UI, you make sure that it's pointing to 7545. But yeah, that's pretty much the only difference in terms of configuring what flavor of Ganache your project is running through. And then when you're ready to, deploy contracts to that particular Ganache instance, you can just copy this command right here, truffle migrate dash dash network development. You can also feel free to call this whatever you want to call it. You can call it develop, you can call it test or whatever it is, or call it Ganache. It doesn't quite have to be development. You're free to edit that as well. Let's talk about Ganache forking. Ganache forking is a really useful feature for dApp developers that are looking to, create or build smart contracts in an environment that really resembles the Ethereum network, whether mainnet or testnet. So this feature kind of allows you to make a copy of the Ethereum network you specify. And I find that really useful because, if you're using Ganache without this feature, you're pretty much using Ganache with non-existent data. But this feature allows you to make a copy of the Ethereum network, which means that you're building and testing your dApp in the same environment it's going to live in, when you're done building. To start Ganache with this particular feature option, all you need to do is pass in the fork flag. That is, you start Ganache with Ganache dash dash fork, and then it creates a fork of the Ethereum mainnet. Or alternatively, if you intend to fork a different network, like say Girly or Sepoli, you can obviously specify what network you want to fork on here, and then it would just make a copy of that. Also important to note that this particular feature uses Infura as its node provider. So if you are interested in using a different node provider and you have an RPC endpoint or the node provider endpoint, you can definitely pass it on onto this particular command, and it would use that instead. Ganache also offers you the option to manipulate time during development, so you can actually fast forward time or rewind time. I find this really useful for smart contract testing because if you have a smart contract that says a particular time has to allow for a particular action to be taken, then during testing, you definitely cannot wait for that particular time to elapse. So you can just, use the increase time function or set time function to manipulate time. Feel free to check out the Ganache latest doc, an interactive doc. You can play around with these RPC methods and see what a typical response would look like. I'm not going to be going into details for that because I think it's really self-explanatory. So just check it out if you're interested. Let's talk about Ganache in browser. So this feature basically allows you to, use Ganache without necessarily downloading it. All you need to do is to include this script tag into your HTML code and you have a running instance of Ganache that you can play with. As a matter of fact, if you include the latest version of Ganache, you also have the Ganache mainnet and testnet fork feature on your browser, which is really interesting because lightweight. There's no need to download any additional software. Just include this link and you're good to go. I'm going to be testing out the Ganache mainnet fork feature on this tutorial. I am going to go to Etherscan, fetch the latest block number on mainnet and use this block number to verify that it actually quite works. To be able to do that though, I need to convert the decimal to hex, and unfortunately I do not know the formula for that, so I have to look it up here. So I just paste the block number on here and convert that to the hex form and copy this one as well. So now that I have the block number that I want to play around with, I am going to create a new npm project, make directory, call this Ganache in browser, cd into Ganache in browser, and then npm init-y to create a node project for me. And once I have that, I can just bring up VS Code and I'm going to add a HTML file called that Ganache .html, paste my hex block number there, and then on the doc you can see where there's this code sample. I'll just copy that and paste that here, and I'm going to replace block number. I'm going to replace the block number starting from OX, and then paste my new hex code, save that, and I'm ready to test this. So I just copy the file path to this file and inspect elements console so that I get some visibility as it's fetching. Its get block by number has been triggered, and it's currently fetching and the Ethereum mainnet. Fantastic. So if you examine the transactions array, you'd find out that the very last transaction on here has the hex number OX1B9, and if you visit Etherscan and you check on the transactions as well, you'd see that the very last one has OX1B9, and the next one OX43, and we have OX43. What this piece of code here is doing is, like I said, it's including a Ganache instance via content delivery network, and I am setting the option for fork, and I'm specifying the mainnet option, and I'm passing that option to the Ganache provider, and I'm saying, hey, Ganache provider, using the eats get block by number RPC method, please fetch me the block with this particular number. That happens to be the latest block on the Ethereum mainnet, and once you get that, console log that on the console, and that's what you can see here. So with a feature like this, you can actually build your smart contracts accessing live contracts, live information. Your dApp is going to be built in an environment that closely resembles what you're going to see when you deploy to a mainnet or even the testnet. And that's it for Ganache. If you really want to delve into Ganache, there's a really cool interactive documentation for Ganache you can definitely check out. It has every single thing you need to know about Ganache, and you can play around with these RPC methods and see what sort of information they'll return back. As a matter of fact, this particular website uses Ganache on the browser, so there's literally no Ganache running physically on my machine. It's just relying on the Ganache that's been included via CDN. So yeah, this is pretty cool. Now on to the last tool within the Truffle suite, Truffle for VS Code extension. So think of Truffle for VS Code extension as a user interface that puts everything Truffle in a single place. So we've touched on Ganache, Truffle CLI, we've touched on the Truffle debugger. All of those distilled into a single user interface for your use. So if you're a non-command line user, you prefer to play around with a user interface, then you should definitely check out the Truffle for VS Code extension. You can install this extension by visiting the VS Code extension marketplace and searching for Truffle for VS Code, or just use the direct link. There's also a VS Code marketplace within VS Code you can try out. I think that's the one. Look for Truffle for VS Code, and yeah, you can install directly. I already have it installed, so there's no point reinstalling it. But yeah, I'll just do a quick demo of what it looks like and some of the things that you can do with this particular extension. There's also a comprehensive documentation for this extension in case you're interested in learning more about the extension and how it works. You can just, visit the Truffle website, VS Code doc, and you should be able to see that. Let's try out some of the Truffle for VS Code extension features. So in the new VS Code window, I am going to hit Shift Command P on my Mac. On Windows, you can hit Shift Ctrl P, and I'm going to select New Solidity Project to create a new project. I'm giving the option to create an empty project, create a sample project, or create a project from Truffle box. I love Truffle boxes. I'm going to select Truffle box. I'm going to use the MetaCoin Truffle box from before. Choose destination. I am going to create a new folder for that. I'll call it MetaCoin 2 since I have one already. And I'll create that, select that as my new project part, and Truffle is currently creating. Sweet. That's done. And as you can see, I have the contract directly with the exact same convert lib library from the past, and MetaCoin smart contract. I have migration file for deployment. I have test file both in JavaScript and Solidity, and I also have the Truffle configuration file. So sweet. So we have all this ready. Let's compile this contract with the Truffle for VS Code extension. So one more time, I hit on Shift Command P, and I search for build contracts, Truffle build contracts. Click on that, and fantastic, my contracts have been compiled, and as you can see, there's a new build folder that contains the contract ABIs. Smooth. So let's see how to deploy contracts with this extension. So I'll go to the contracts folder. This is the contract that I want to deploy. I'll right click on that and select deploy contracts. You know, I can actually deploy the contract via Truffle dashboard, which means that I can, deploy this contract to Gurley or wherever I intend to. Or I can also create a new network. This means that if I want to deploy to Ganache, I can create a new network, or if I have an inferior endpoint, I can obviously pass that in. So I intend to deploy to Ganache. So I'm just going to select Ganache service, a local service or a fork. I don't really want to play around with the fork. So just choose a local service. The recommended port is this, obviously. So I hit enter, give it a name. I'm going to, stick to the development's name, and click on this network, and it spins up a Ganache instance for me, and it's currently deploying the contract to that particular network. Smooth. So as you can see, I've made 2 deployments, one for the library and one for the smart contract itself, and here's the entire cost. As you can see, it's fairly easy. We can choose to deploy to Gurley using the same method, and I'll just deploy using the Truffle dashboard this time. It spins up a Truffle dashboard instance. I connect my MetaMask wallet. I connect to Gurley, and I go back and deploy contracts, deploy via dashboard, and it's deploying my contract via Truffle dashboard. Notice I did not set up any node provider. I just confirmed that. Confirm, and new prompts, confirm. You have one penny transaction will not be processed until. No problem. And give it a couple seconds, and deployment will be complete. So deployments are done. Again, we can verify this by extracting the contract address, going to Gurley Etherscan, and pasting this address there, hit enter, and yeah, 34 seconds ago. So that's it, guys. You've seen how to set up Truffle on your local machine using the ultimate guide. You also see some of the tricks you can use to improve your developer experience. Feel free to check out the product documentation for more in-depth knowledge on how to manipulate these tools. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.